Hello friends from my Dubai veranda. I'm here for the Emirates Airline Literature Festival 2022. Grab the dates if you are in Dubai. I will be at the Emirates NBD Poetry for All 2022 prize giving ceremony as one of the judges for the children's competition. On 9th at the open mic sharing some of my Desi poetry, and on 12th at the Desi drama session, of which tickets are still available. So today's readings is a short story, The Point of Irish Coffee, that had won me a gold place and one of my first publications in an anthology. The Point of Irish Coffee. It was Mistress and him by the moonlight. She sits with her hair flowing, body forming a silhouette like a picture in an old album. He sits with his ears slack, tail between his legs, watching flecks of ash fall off her cigarette. They watch the moon travelling through the clouds together. She is listening to the noises coming from the next door. He is waiting for his next meal. Some nights he will not get dinner at all. She will forget to give him any. The dog will then stave off his hunger, whimpering and watching the spirits passing over the balcony. She begins with a slow chuckle now that sounds like the low grumble of a bitch, till it becomes a loud laugh. They are fighting, she declares in a loud voice. A frown collects over his forehead and his ears go up. He can now hear the neighbors' threatening voices trying to outdo each other. The voices reach a crescendo and Mistress flicks her cigarette in a gesture of marked victory. The smouldering cigarette somersaults 250 feet below. Earlier in the day, Mistress had called the maid who worked in the adjoining flat and had asked her to do a kind favour. She gave the maid an embellished perfumed kurti and told her to place it in her Sahib, Mr. Mehta's wardrobe when no one was looking. The maid, who smelled of detergent and dampness, had stared at Mistress with questioning eyes, and Mistress had answered her with a wad of crisp, crackling cash. The maid left in pursuit of Mistress's plans. The dog had seen how Mistress had stitched a small cloth with embroidered initials onto the kurti the previous day and sprayed it with a sweet, sickening floral perfume. She had then sniffed it over and over again, like he sniffed for familiar smells among old shoes. The maid must have done her job, because Nischala Mehta stormed out of her husband's house the following morning, and Mistress tiptoed to the edge of the balcony and, leaning her stomach softly over the railing, watched her go. She then did a slow waltz. The dog couldn't convince her then of his hunger pangs. He lay low with his triangular face placed on the carpet, waiting for the lights of the house to be turned off. Instead, Mistress rocked herself on her favourite chair, eyes blazing in victory. 1 down, 2 to go, she said, reaching for the fridge. This calls for a celebration, she exclaimed and poured some strong-smelling Irish whiskey into her glass and his bowl. She then mixed it with rich-smelling cream and snuffy-odoured coffee. Irish coffee, she whispered into his coal-black eyes, stirring the contents in his bowl, unmindful of the thick layer of cigarette ash that floated on it. The drink smelt corrosive. Not thirsty, but very hungry and grateful, the dog lapped it up. The drink hit him in the head like a bullet. He curled up for the night in a corner of the balcony, dreaming of distant places, full moons and war cries. From behind the sheen of his sleep, he could hear the chanting of Mistress's mantra. I will ruin them all. I will ruin them all. I will ruin them all, she said again and again. The day Master left floats by him in a dream. He remembered the day only too well. Master had left with a young girl smelling of raw fruit around his arm, never to return. Mistress had screamed until her voice sounded like a bleat of a dying animal. In the evening, 3 women wrapped with thick perfumes had come to sympathize. Oh, poor you! Oh, poor you! They kept saying. But the moment Mistress turned her back, they chortled, chuckled and shrieked. The house reverberated with the echoes of their backslaps. The cackling women were none other than their neighbours, Mrs. Mehta, Mrs. Kapoor and Mrs. Vacha. Mistress had grown old in days after that. Her hair had turned white. Her face had become a film of wrinkles. She stopped looking into the mirrors. They made her wince. The dog stayed close on heel to watch her every twitch, but that was all he could have done then to help. The morning appears late to the dog. His eyes feel puffy and sticky, and all his fur has shed. His spine twists inside his back and hurts with the slightest of movement, pulling him backwards. He stumbles along, searching for Mistress. Now we teach bitch Kapoor a lesson, she mutters. How about making the wretched woman have an illicit affair this time? Can't we have their driver involved? She cackles hysterically before removing a heap of crisp ink-stinking notes. We can have a lover, a pudgy man or a handsome dwarf run down the steps naked just when Mr. Kapoor is coming back from work. She laughs rowdily, and the dog watches her eyes recede into weary eye bags. She hadn't noticed that his tail had reduced to half its size, or that his pointy velvety ears had almost vanished, leaving behind gaping ear holes. He hadn't barked all morning. The foul-smelling Kapoor's driver was called and given a crunchy envelope with photographs. See that you give it to Mr. Kapoor when she's not there, hissed Mistress. She gave him a wad of cash. Next week, the driver came announcing that Mr. Kapoor had slapped a legal notice on his adulterous wife. Mistress and dog celebrated with their shared concoction of Irish coffee, and her laughter resonated around the house. The dog knew she was happy, just like he would have been had he got to eat his favourite lamb chop. He would have wagged his tail to compliment her. But it had dropped off. He had collected it along with the fur in the corner of the room, so it didn't get in Mistress's way. A soft brown mountain now it was. He tugged instead at his new earlobe that had been growing from under those gaping ear holes, just like the thick curves of hair that had been growing above his eyes. He couldn't show Mistress how long the toes on his forelegs had grown, almost like fingers, or convince her of the difficulty he faced in slurping up the drink from his bowl. His face was now not triangular, but flat and squarish. But what surprised him the most was that he could now walk comfortably on his toes instead of his foes. It was Mistress and him by the moonlight. He sat on a low stool, a leg crossed over the other, back upright. She sat on a customary couch, her hair making promises to the wind. "Mrs. Vacha now," she muttered through clenched teeth. He drew circles of smoke from a cigarette into the air, his mind wagging with an idea. He had learned to smoke. It aided in thinking. He had taken her hatred in all his faithfulness. He now inched closer to her, slowly forming words and separating them from past growls. He said, "How about having her daughter's guitar teacher involved? He's a junkie and seems in need of money." "Good idea," she said, squinting her eyes reading a distant signpost. She stretched her hand to pat his mane. Instead, her fingers entangled into soft curls. Sipping their drinks, they zeroed in on their plan. He is her best friend now, something he could never be when dog. He had taken in all her hatred. It had converted him into a man. The Point of Irish Coffee. All my books of poetry and short stories, my friends, are available at the Magrudi Bookstore, Emirates Airline Literature Festival. If you happen to be visiting the festival, don't forget to check out Bombay Hangovers, Paper Asylum, and 4 Degrees of Separation. This is all for me for now then. See ya soon. Signing off here, your dost Rochelle Potkar from her Dubai veranda.